A contemporary of the aeronca C3 was the Praga E114, also known as the Air Baby. It was a large wooden monoplane designed by Jaroslav Slekta and built by the CKD Praga company of Czechoslovakia. Unlike the aeronca with its multitude of bracing wires, the Air Baby used a cantilever wooden wing in the Fokker style. The prototype was powered by an aeronca E113 engine, but production models had Praga's own near-identical Praga B and B2 series engines fitted. F. Hillson Sons, a plywood manufacturer from Manchester, took out a license with the Praga company to build the Praga Air Baby in the United Kingdom as the Hillson Praga. F. Hillson Sons also bought one solitary Czechoslovakian-built Praga Baby, seen in this photograph, to use as a demonstrator and prototype. This aircraft featured heavily in their early advertisements, but it was then sold to Mr. Harold Brooke. In May 1936, Harold Brooke flew the aircraft from England to Cape Town in approximately 2 weeks, taking 135 hours. The weather was a lot better than when Llewellyn flew the same trip 3 months earlier, and Brooke got to Cape Town without incident. Back in England, F. Hillson Sons subcontracted the Jarrett Car Company of Bradford to build the Praga B2 engine under license. The first Hillson Praga flew in May 1936. The aircraft flew well, but unfortunately the Jarrett-built Praga B2 engines proved unreliable, and several had to be replaced with Czechoslovakian units or the slightly heavier Jap 99 as used on the aeronca. At £385, the Hillson was £10 cheaper than the aeronca. Several were sold to flying schools who used them for training under the Civil Air Guard scheme. Several aircraft were exported. 3 Hillson Pragas went to owners in Australia. Two were also sold to Singapore, although one was lost in a fatal accident when the wing leading edge above the cockpit, which hinged backwards to provide entrance, came undone in flight. By the end of the Second World War, only 2 Hillson Pragas survived, and one of those was crashed in 1946. This aircraft, G-AEYM, was the last survivor. It had several enthusiastic owners and was accompanied by several spare engines, no doubt taken from less lucky Hillson Pragas. By 1957 it belonged to Christopher and Claire Roberts, but unfortunately was written off in a landing accident in Italy. Somewhat surprisingly, the longest surviving of the Hillson supplied Pragas was the original Czechoslovakian one. It stayed flying in South Africa until the early 1950s, and then was converted into a glider before finally being destroyed in the 1970s. The engine and propeller still survive with an enthusiast in Pretoria. So where's this slice of Czechoslovakian pre-war nostalgia taking us? Well, very simple. Some years ago I bought a complete Praga B2. Came out of a Hillson Praga AEYM. It's probably one of the spare engines from the Chris Roberts aircraft, and it's allegedly done 107 hours from new. I took it apart 2 or 3 years ago, mainly because I was a bit concerned about corrosion inside it. And in fact, although the crankcase was fairly clean, the back case was horrible. Although it's all cleaned up very well, and there was no corrosion damage to anything like timing gears, etc., which all survived without any trouble at all. In fact, all of it survived amazingly well. And I put the crank together with new rollers. I've got the old ones here. The old ones were not brilliant. So for the sakes of, they're 1/4 inch by 5/8, so they're really easy to get new ones. The journals were fine. They took a quick polish. They were fine. So the crank all went back together. That's all sealed up in there for now, oily and lovely and clean. And about 10 minutes ago in the post, literally this morning's post, came a pair of oil control rings, which was the last thing I was missing. So the plan is to put this together. Next door I've got quite a lot of aeronca spares, so the other thing I'm going to do, as we lay this out on the bench, which I'm going to do properly on the next episode, we're going to get an aeronca crankcase as well, an aeronca crank and various other aeronca parts, and we'll look at them, because this was developed from the early aeronca overhead valve engine. In fact, I think these cylinders took quite a lot of Warner inspiration, because of course the early overhead valve aeronca engines actually used Warner scarab cylinder heads. So we're going to have a bit of a measure and compare as we go. This thing is quite a lot lighter as well, several kilos lighter in its finished form. I think it's because the crankcase and all the castings are made out of a kind of magnesium alloy that's sort of cheerfully corroding for the last 80 years. It's probably not quite as good in some ways from a longevity point of view as the aeronca, but it is a lighter engine. So we'll look at all the parts as we go and lay it out on the bench and put it together in a few easy episodes. I've got one magneto which works, the other one doesn't work at all, it's dead as anything, but we can get it running with one magneto. And the carburettor is the only other thing that's a bit of a compromise at the moment. Yesterday I actually managed for the first time ever to get the carburettor to pieces. I was going to make this film yesterday afternoon, but pretty good job I didn't, as the piston rings came today. This is the original Zenith. So yesterday it actually came in two. It's been soaking in stinking pot of diesel for God knows how long, and it is horrible. Although it is coming apart. In the meantime though, I actually made a little adapter, you can't see it, I'll show you next time, for a Stromberg NES2. Now this one I've run on the aeronca C3. It's properly set up. It was probably set up on the bench. So I know that's a good carb. So I might well start off using that carburettor, because I know it's a good carburettor and there'll be no issues with setting it up. Anyway, that's about it really. Episode 2, we'll start laying it all out and looking at bits. Thanks for watching.